de-escalation strategies and other difficult topics. And this is a makeup session for a session that was held this year on October 14th, 2024. But if you're watching this video afterwards, or it's been sent to you because it might help you, or it's been uploaded somewhere, these are just kind of some strategies that can be used when maybe you don't see eye to eye to someone, or someone has some misconceptions about how you do things, or they're just upset, in general. There are lots of ways that things can be approached in the classroom setting with students. So this could also be used in that situation as well. So here you go. This first page is like a notes page / agenda, and it's just going to help keep me on topic and everything that I'm trying to share with everyone. So this would be something that we would do in person, but how are you doing, right, is a good question to pause at different times of the day and ask yourself. And there can be different check-ins that you do have with yourself. It's sometimes people err so much on the I'm trying to keep going no matter what, that they put their own needs aside. I know I certainly do, and I'm working on this every single day to do better. As you can see right now, I'm rubbing my hands together, and I do this a lot. It helps me to kind of reconnect. Your hands are some of the most sensitive areas of your body. There's tons of nerve endings in different parts of your hands. And so doing this helps you to kind of reconnect with your body. You can also wiggle your toes. I'm doing that in my shoes right now. That can help with kind of reconnecting you from the upper part of your body to the bottom. And that's just kind of in the moment, kind of some quick check-ins. And then you can be if I'm feeling tension anywhere, try and do something to address that. So that might be pulling your shoulders back if you realize you've been slouched forward working at your computer, or all those kinds of things. But checking in with yourself, checking in up here is important, but also checking in with your entire body, because if you're not feeling well, then that can affect how we do our job each day here at school. So there's lots of different feelings check-ins you can use, and some of them are really super duper creative. There's a couple of websites that you can go to look for one, but let me just real quickly talk about, I use a lot of coloring in my counseling with students. I feel like being able to put an image to what you're feeling and then choosing different colors is a great way to help students to feel more calm and empowered and that sort of thing. And it works for adults too. And I just dropped something. Okay, but I thought I had the picture that I used in the program in there, but we'll just use an example with this quote from Mr. Rogers. So this is something I carry around with me every day. I carry around inspirational quotes and something to color, because it is one of those things that it's low stakes. It doesn't require much brain power, but it does require sustained focus. And for me, as someone whose workday is constantly interrupted, I'm a school counselor, so that might be even when I am teaching students, something might come up and I have to leave. I have very little control over that, and it can feel very isolating and also kind of keep you on edge. So it can keep your nervous system activated. But simple things, taking time to do simple things. Oh, I need to turn that around so I can read it. Hang on. Doing simple things is something that can really help you. It says, "You've made this day a special day just by being you. There is no one in the world quite like you, and I like you just the way you are." Now, obviously, I've only done the quote so far, but you can see I've started. And these, while I might not post these things anywhere, it's almost like a form of meditation for me in the moment. And I try to couch it that way, that I am not wasting time. Right? That's something my old brain would have told me, that I am not occupied, I am wasting my time. But I would never say that to a student, so why am I saying that to me? Right? I'm human too. I deserve to have fun. I deserve to try out new pens, right? So those kinds of things. And then you can think about how you're feeling as you're doing it. You might reflect on your day. So yeah, just think about how special you are and to keep that in mind. All right, so that's our feelings check-in, and I will edit part of that so it's shorter. Okay, so let's go to our next thing. In our meeting, we started with, after that, we did parent communication de-escalation. So we're going to talk about what we call active listening, if I can figure out, there we go, Active listening. Come on, buddy. Wow, I just paused it because it took me forever to figure out where I was clicking wrong. But we're going to talk about active listening. Active listening is sometimes called helping skills if you're a helping professional, so a school counselor, licensed counselor, any type of social worker, anybody who is involved in working with people to help get through their problems. Active listening is one of the core skills that we have. So, one of the things that just as a human, when I'm having a normal conversation, just talking with somebody, it's going to be a lot more back and forth, right? I'm going to bring up a topic, we're going to talk about it, and maybe it makes the other person think of something, and we do that. Active listening is not one-sided. It's almost like reflection plus. Like there's a connection that you're trying to make with the person, but that connection is so that that person can start reflecting back on what's going on, and that you can try and understand more about the situation. It's founded in what we call humanistic counseling philosophy, and it comes from the work of Carl Rogers and Virginia Axline and a number of other people. If you're interested in any of that, I love to talk about it. But here's a quote from Carl Rogers about active listening. We think we listen, but we very rarely do we listen with real understanding, true empathy. Yet listening of this very special kind is one of the most potent forces for change that I know. It is important to note that a lot of people can fake active listening, but if they're not actually doing it, it's going to come off as fake. Like if someone is pretending like they care, and then there's going to be something. Our brains are wired to pick up on that, and not everybody can, because not everybody is neurotypical, but it's something that, like, a lot of times people will say, I'm not a good fit with this person, this counselor, or I'm not a good fit with this teacher, and it's because maybe that authenticity is not being conveyed. And there's always going to be like a couple kids that maybe you're having trouble reaching that might think this, but if it's a lot of students, that might be something to think about. What am I doing? What am I saying? What is my body language doing to communicate that? All right, so it is, again, it's a communication practice where you are conveying sincere interest, okay? As educators, active listening can help create a space where students can think more clearly about what they are saying and thinking, and it helps to create an inclusive teaching environment. So active listening is not really something that you practice outside of your teaching. It's like a skill that supports it. So a lot of times people think, well, I just don't have time to listen to my kids and help dig deeper. We're on a time crunch, time schedule. But this kind of thing can actually help you with making that connection so that you have fewer discipline problems, you have fewer time off task, that if you are encouraging your kids, then it really helps you with doing the PBIS as far as like 5 to 1. But the encouragement doesn't always have to be like, good job, you did a great thing, you know, or even PBIS specific, like, I really like the way you helped your friend by helping them pick up all their books. It's not even like that. It's more of, I'm interested in you, I'm listening. So attentive to body language. So I'm just going to give you some tips that if you are struggling with active listening, these are kind of things to be mindful of as you're practicing. And if you ever want to practice these skills, come on down and Miss T will help you. She loves this. And obviously you can tell I used to watch The Price is Right after Mr. Rogers growing up. So consider your posture, your body movements, your facial expressions, and eye contact when talking with students. Eye contact is not necessarily all the time needed. If you struggle with eye contact, it's okay. You know, sometimes we all do. When I have multiple things in my hand or I'm distracted a little bit, I have trouble with eye contact. Like in stores, if I'm checking out, I will look at and make sure everything's out, get my credit card out, and then try to make eye contact with the person helping me, because I think it helps them. It helps me to feel more connected to people. Not everybody's like that, though. Some people just couldn't care less, and that's fine, too. But it is a good time to practice that, because it's very low stakes. You're going to walk out of that store and not look at them in the eyes again. But that is something to keep in mind. And not every student is going to want to make eye contact with you. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. You know, a lot of Asian cultures, it is considered disrespectful to look someone directly in the eyes, especially if there's a power differential. It's more of a, you're going to show respect and you're going to lots of different things. But just to keep that in mind, and before you jump to conclusions that this kid is not being truthful because they're not looking at me in the eyes, it could be something that they're just not comfortable with. So body movements and posture. Okay, if you are conveying interest, you're going to, just like we tell the kids in second step, if you are looking at them, if you are listening to them, all those different things, then you are showing that you are interested. So keeping mindful of that, right? And this, you can't always have a sustained conversation like this, but even if it's just walking around the room, checking up on the kids, letting them know that you're paying attention. Yeah. Okay, so those were the two I wanted to point out from that. During classroom discussions, remember to practice reflective listening skills. So, all right, so this is the part where it really starts to take some practice, because as a teacher and as a former teacher, I am content driven. I taught middle school and high school, and they have tests at the end, or at least the latter years that I taught, they did. And you have to drill that information, and it is a lot of content. But it is also important to establish an inclusive dialogue. So they used to talk about the flipped classroom all the time. That's easier to do with older kids who already have certain habits established. But even then there's challenges because you're going to have varying reading levels throughout your building. Okay, so paraphrasing, repeating, repeating back to the student what is said, probing, so trying to ask maybe a clarifying question, and remembering. Paraphrasing is really easy to do. We do it all the time for kids, right? So if I use the quote that I did earlier, you've made this a special day just by being you. There is no one in the world quite like you, and I like you just the way you are. So Mr. Rogers in this quote said that everybody is enough just the way they are. I paraphrased it, right? And I used it in a different way, right? Doing that with a kid when they're asking something or they say an answer can let them know that you're paying attention to them and making sure that your body language is there. Clarifying a probing question is when you ask a little bit more. If they say, I had a really good weekend this week, or really good weekend this weekend, and you say, what was so interesting about it? What did you do? Or what happened? And it doesn't have to be judgmental. It's just be mindful of tone, right? Don't be what happened? Because even if that is your natural personality, some kids are going to take that as sarcasm, or going to take that as she really doesn't care. She's just paying lip service to it. But genuine interest, smiling with your eyes, if you have trouble expressing emotions on your face. I used to practice in front of Zoom because that's how I first started counseling, because I was in grad school during the pandemic, right? And so being able to pay attention to someone's face and that sort of stuff at that time is really helpful. And these are kind of ways that you can build into your classroom that you're inclusive and that you're listening to their concerns. Right, and having students pair up with each other to practice these skills after you've modeled them by working with a student, see what I'm doing there, it can help students to really hone in on those group making or group work things, and being really clear about it. Hey, we're going to practice this skill today. We've got 4 students in each group, okay? And our first person in the group is going to be our timekeeper. And that timekeeper is going to be the person that after a minute or so is going to say, hey, or after however many minutes of discussion we have, the person who's the timekeeper is going to summarize what's been said. So they're going to say, hey, today we've been talking about basketball and all of the different places that you can play on the court, right? And then, so they kind of summarize it together. You could have a person in your group who's responsible for recording things down, who's responsible for taking notes. So they can be the paraphraser. They can work with that sort of thing. Or they're trying to, maybe you have a repeating game, where a student says, Des Moines is the capital of Iowa. Gosh, I hope that's right. Des Moines is the capital of Iowa. And the person says, okay, we're listing out state capitals, right? So we're paraphrasing what's going on. If, like, let's say I walk in and I say, hey, what's going on, Johnny? And Johnny tells me, then Johnny is paraphrasing. He's summarizing in some ways, but he's paraphrasing what he's doing at that moment. Or I could say, hey, what are you reading? Can you tell me a little bit about it? Then that would be also paraphrasing. But being able to model those skills for the kids, like when you do it and in their conversations, like if they are sharing something from their lives, that's how you build that connection, and that's how you help prevent having to have de-escalation. But even in escalation, it is really important to practice that skill of checking in on yourself. Hang on, I'm going to pause this. I got to go get some water. Yep, so I just modeled self-care because I went to get water. There you go. See, that wasn't an interruption in production. But paraphrasing student comments to make sure that's where we were. Okay, so when students are answering a question, and this is kind of like second nature to us as adults, like to give some feedback to kids because we love the kids and try to encourage them. You know, one of the ways is you can model the language that's used for this. So paraphrasing another's comments, asking for clarification. So how does this actually help us to de-escalate someone? Okay, so that's an excellent question, Mrs. T. And if you guys had questions, and now we were in person, then you might ask that. How can we use this to our advantage? Well, the first thing that I would say is that you need to have strong self-regulation, okay? And one of the ways to have strong self-regulation is to make sure that in each and every day, you are taking care of yourself. And a lot of that has to do with understanding that, and this is something that as someone who went through teacher school and is now a school counselor, they do not really stress this in teaching. And honestly, I think it's probably more important than in a lot of other jobs that work with the public, because you are going to be dealing with, you know, people whose emotional brains are not fully connected to the logical parts of their brains. So appealing to logic with kids when their behavior is off the chain at a certain point just doesn't work. And you have to rely on calming strategies, because if those connections between their logical part of their brain and their in their emotional part of their brain, the limbic system inside there, if they flipped their lid, so to speak, okay, the first thing you're going to have to do is to pull them back down, right? And one of the easiest ways to do that is through having strong self-regulation strategies. If you also are struggling with self-regulation and need to take a break, that's your nervous system shouting the alert, alert, alert. Like, don't ignore that out of a sense of duty. As someone who burnt out as a teacher, right here, you're looking at her. Now, granted, I had a lot of life circumstances that made that happen. But as someone who had that go on, but still wanted to work with kids, like, I knew I had to do something different. And I am, very slowly. I'm still a work in progress, as is everyone else. But creating work-life boundaries is incredibly important, because this can help you to establish that front of what I am going to do and when I am going to do it. Okay, so you are a teacher. That is your job, right? But a job is just a portion of your life. And as a young person, or as a person who's just starting out in the career of teaching, you are not your job, okay? This is not said enough. It's a part of your identity, but that's a part that can change in your identity, right? If at some point it becomes too much for you to continue to survive, you either have to adapt or you have to do something different, right? And adapting, you can do any combination of those. Like, I'm still in public education, but I'm not doing what I once was doing. I'm doing stuff like this, and I love this. So making sure that you are making time for you and your family is going to preserve you in this profession long term. If you are living to work, you're doing it wrong. If you are living to work, you are doing it wrong. But if you are working so that you can live outside of here, you're doing it right. Okay. And I think, especially, I went to UNCG's Teacher Academy, and I went from 2003 to 2007, and I'm a naturally anxious person. Like, I have lots of different things after my, name in my files, okay, as far as how anxious I am. So this was something I could have desperately needed when I was in my undergraduate degree. And I didn't establish it beforehand, and it took a long time to learn it, right? But coming from it from a place of, this is as far as I'm willing to go, this is the line where I'm willing to negotiate, and this is the line where I really don't care about something, and it can just happen, right? So they talk a lot about like fighting your battles in the classroom, like pick what must be done. So making sure that you have like clear priorities about like, when I go home, I am not doing anything for work, or when I go home, I'm doing the one thing that must be done for tomorrow, and then I'm putting it in my bag. Then I'm doing some type of ritual to get work out, right? For me as a counselor, I'll tell you what I do. I go home and I sing all the way home. And if my voice is out, I whisper it, or I do something that helps me to get that out. And it's twofold. I find it really relaxing, and it lets energy out, and it also forces me to deep breathe. One of the things about like singing, like I'm a belter singer, so it all comes from my stomach. So when I breathe in, I have to force all the air out through making the notes, and that really helps me. Now, granted, I don't always sing on key, and I'm not going to do it here, but it really helps me to relax. And then when I get home, I change clothes immediately into something comfortable, or I go take a shower and then change clothes. And I talk to myself saying that these are the things I'm doing for self-care. So right now I feel this, this, and this. After this, I'm going to check in and say, this is how I feel about this, this, and this. And it will help you to kind of create that ritual with your brain, because your brain will be like, well, I associate coming home with being relaxed, right? And with not the stress that I feel at work. But if I start meshing those two things together, I'm going to get to the point where I can't pull them apart, and I'm going to start using all of my at-home energy at work and all of my work energy at home. And they don't necessarily go together, right? So the whole point, you know how we say like giving kids choice gives them the ability to de-escalate sometimes? The same applies to us. If you feel forced to do something, you're going to resent it. And it could just be the dishes in the sink, right? But if you can like say, I'm going to do this for my self-care for these few minutes, and then I'm going to go take care of that, it might help you to regulate down long enough that maybe that energy is not wasted in being angry. Instead, it's calmed down, and then you can take care of that, and then maybe you don't expend that energy, God forbid, on someone else, right? Make someone else feel bad, or, or beat yourself up if you turn it inward. So establishing a work-life boundary is like tantamount to this job. If you do not get it, tantamount the right word? Okay. But having something to do that says, I'm leaving this office, I'm leaving this classroom, okay, something that helps you to calm that down is a really good, could be tidying up your work area, as they say here, silencing work notifications on your phone. Class Dojo has a setting, if you have it on your phone, which I have it on there because a lot of times I have to message the whole school if there's something that's late, like a bus that's late. But there's a setting that you can say, I do not receive notifications after 5 p.m. and I do not receive them on weekends. Set yourself up that time. You do not have to answer things after 5 p.m. If it is an emergency, they will call the school, or they will figure it out. They will message somebody else at that point. And if it's an emergency that happens outside of school, there's emergency services for that. Hang on. Self-care. Okay, so setting an intention for a week is really cool. I love this planner company. It's called, what the name of this place? I've used them for years, ever since I started back to school. Bloom. They're called Bloom, and they have their own website, but I think you can also get them on different retailers, maybe Amazon, I don't know. But what's great about them is they have a lot of self-care strategies that are kind of built into their planners. I know, they've got goals of the month for years, and they've got one of the things that I like as someone who is also studied a little bit on acceptance and commitment therapy, which has a lot to do with your values and how well you're living them. So you have like a values sort, like, so you go through the common values, you circle the ones you like, and then you put your favorite or the ones that you want to have the best. Like for my top one is compassion, love, and faith. I'm trying to really grow and my treating others kinder and treating myself kinder. I am really hard on myself, comes along with the anxiety territory. Happiness, family belonging, and yours would differ obviously for whatever it happens to be. And then more things I want to do this year, and then less things. So like anxiety and self-judgment. That's right on there. So it's really good to kind of keep you grounded, to say these are the things that I'm feeling. If you're the kind of person like me who tends to amplify the negative and minimize the positive, try for a week to flip it and then see how you feel, and then try for another week. So this can be really artificial, and this is kind of like a CBT, a cognitive behavioral therapy practice, that every time that you catch yourself in a negative thought, immediately try to rephrase it so it's not negative or something that counteracts it. So like I will use one that happened to me not too long ago. I stayed up late helping my kid with his box car for Pinewood Derby. He's in Scouts. And he had gotten it together, so it's not like I did that part, but he wanted it to look just like the Batmobile. And so I was helping him with getting it painted. He was doing the painting, and I was doing like the little details, and then it was too late. He had to go to bed. And so I finished it out for him, but like I realized I was staying up really late, and where was I going with that? Oh, I'm going to have to re-record this part. Hold on. Let's see. Oh. Let's pause. Yes. We were talking about cognitive distortions. So if you catch yourself in negative thought patterns, so negative thought patterns being like, I will never get this looking exactly like the Batmobile, right? It will always look like crummy and that sort of stuff. And then thinking, well, you wouldn't want it to look exactly like the Batmobile, right? Because it's art. It's something that you're making with your kid. It shows that you guys had this idea together, and that it's something that you put your best effort into. So it's a lot like fixed versus growth mindset, but a lot of times if we have what's called the cognitive distortion of negative thinking, or black and white thinking, where it's either all bad or all good, if we can kind of counteract that and we do it enough, even if it seems really artificial at first, it can start to change our like initial reaction, or it makes us more willing to accept something else. So just keep that in mind as you go through. So setting an intention is kind of like that. It says, from this moment, this is like where you say, you're setting the intention of that boundary. I am not going to let this happen. And saying it out loud lets you hear it, okay? And it lets you also think about it. So it kind of externalizes it. You can also write it down. Like this journal, the planner I was talking about, it's got a weekly intention. Well, it says like this week's focus up at the top of any given week. And so it lets you kind of like, this week I am focusing on making sure I drink enough water, because that helps a lot. Your body's made of water. It just doesn't work right when I don't have enough. Changing your environment. This has worked wonders for me in the past, like rearranging something, adding something new. It's kind of like you throw something in and see if it changes how you feel. That's how systems therapy works too, but it works more like the family system. So trying anything, like if you are feeling kind of like uncomfortable or that sort of thing, don't ignore those feelings, okay? Do something about it, because it's going to help you to maintain that regulation. You need to change how you're approaching that. Walking away from that kid, taking a moment for yourself, rolling your neck. Ooh, my shoulder's sore. I was shoveling snow. Okay, doing all those different things can help you to kind of reset. And drinking water, especially cold water, hits the vagus nerve that runs parallel to the back of the throat. So the vagus nerve is like that one that's like, ooh, here's fight. Ooh, here's flight. And it kind of turns them on and off. Okay, so changing your behavior, all of this stuff is conscious, right? So these are things that you can do in the moment, right? Anytime that like the self-doubt and that sort of stuff creeps in, like if you catch it, consider it an opportunity to change that way of thinking. Don't like say, I will never feel better about this. Never is like a dirty word to me. Don't say it. So like saying, I'm feeling pretty bad right now, but I will feel better later. Like I am feeling bad about how that lesson went, and I wonder if my kids even got any part of it at all. But then you can say, well, you know what? It didn't work this time. It might work with a different class. Or I've learned that I need to try this part differently. Like maybe how I put kids in groups didn't work. I let them choose. Ooh. Or I put them in groups and suddenly they weren't getting along. All those different things can change how you feel about it. But all these different tips can help you to set that firm boundary. When someone is upset with you, the natural thing is to defend yourself. You want to defend yourself if someone is upset with you, especially if you feel like you've done nothing wrong. Now, and it takes a pretty big person and a person who has a lot of emotional regulation and maturity to admit if they've made a mistake. And at some point in her teaching career, you're going to do that, right? And making sure that you're communicating with the people who can support you when that happens is really, really, really crucial. So maintaining work-life boundaries can also be extended to maintaining like very strong professional boundaries. So in the way that you communicate with parents, in the way that you communicate with your class, your teammates, and that sort of thing. I always try to err on the side of preserving the relationship because you never know like what someone may be going through and that sort of thing. So in the moment, if a parent, let's say, is coming in hot or a student is bound and determined to get under your skin that day, don't take the bait, right? And that is easier said than done. I've been in a lot of situations where I was the person that had made someone angry and saying, I am sorry that for how you feel. Or if there's something that you did that was wrong, you'd be like, I made that mistake. I want to be able to fix it. What can we do to help fix it? And then kind of like looking through what all the situations are. If someone is mad for how, like, let's say you handled a discipline concern. If you've done everything according to the book, rely on the book saying, hey, well, I saw Johnny push Jenny in the lunch line and I put it in as a minor infraction and I gave them silent lunch. And then little Johnny goes home and says that he wasn't talking and he didn't shove her and he didn't need silent lunch, da 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 da. And you call back and be like, well, ma'am, I saw that he did that and so I wrote it up. Or sir, you know, and if you're in that situation where someone is angry at you or you anticipate it, ask for help beforehand because it can be really soothing to have someone who is a third party and someone who has like the training and trying to pull someone back from being angry. It ain't always going to work. We're always at some point in our lives going to have somebody mad at us. It just is what it is. But you don't need to take it with you, which is why having a firm work-life boundary is really important. And also understanding that you have the kid's best interest in mind. And if for some reason you've gotten dysregulated and said something you shouldn't have, apologizing to the kid, like saying, hey, that was like too harsh for me. I did not mean it the way it came out. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. It takes a big person and a person with a lot of emotional maturity in the moment to be able to say, I can do better, you know? I'm not going to hurt myself by beating myself up about the mistake I made, which is one of the things I do sometimes. Everyone does. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to do some reflection, and then I'm going to change my behavior, right? And we're all human. We all have mental health. We all have things that we are dealing with, right? But it's almost like you put on a mantle of professionalism when you come in, and that mantle is also can help to establish that boundary, right? That I'm not going to talk about things that are not relevant, right, to the classroom. I'm going to not talk about like my at-home life. I don't want to blur those boundaries, and so that the energy goes back and forth. And it starts with being intentional as far as that's concerned. So, you know, it's the same thing on how we approach teaching like BARC expectations. You try to be as intentional as possible and as clear as possible. And I hope that helps. If you want to discuss anything further, I am always available. This should be about an hour, what the recording is. I have no problem if you want to speed my voice up and make me sound like this, to watch it. Okay. Bye.